I think the first thing people hear should be us saying, "Let's decide what the show is."
But we're still, I guess,
on
we
the
can put
air.
out the slate.
You want a slate?
Yeah.
Okay, let's slate.
All right. 3, 2,
2, 1.
1.
We could also leave it in for a sneak peek at what slating sounds like for us.
Yeah, it's very bizarre. It's hard to do with no visual.
It's odd.
Like, it's not a slate. It's odd.
I wonder what other podcasters do. And if it's
I've been
similar.
on other podcasts that have done remote stuff. They do a very similar thing.
Yeah.
I think ours is better.
Because we clap.
Because we clap. It's a sharp
'Cause
sound.
we count.
We count together.
All right. Yeah, like, because people also like our deep dives being long and casual, so I could see us leaving what we're saying right now in. But should we get started? Should we decide what the show is?
I want to, just because this is, as far as this show goes, which we have yet to do yet, record an episode of. This is a dense one. It's as dense as it gets in terms of movies.
Yeah, other than maybe the Stand miniseries.
That's fair. That's also a lot more time with the material.
Yes, but we'll
Stands.
definitely do that as an episode, as the whole Stand miniseries. We'll just need to commit some more time to watching it. Yeah, all right. Well, why don't you welcome everyone and say hi and shit.
Well, if we're already rolling.
I think we should leave this in, but you should still artificially.
Welcome
there you go.
everybody to the new show. This is the new show. It's the deep dive show. If you watch Coen Brothers Brothers, or
You
listen
watched
to
it.
Coen's,
You
I
saw
always make that mistake. Shut up. If you listened to Coen Brothers Brothers and liked Michael Swaim and Abe Epperson, the two hosts of this show, discuss at length, the symbology, the events, what tickled us, what we didn't like about a certain film. Well, we're doing a new one, and this one is even bigger, possibly, because it deals with the entire catalog, or as many as we want, with Stephen King's adaptations to film. This is Kings of King.
Kings of King, yes. Stephen King, the most adapted English language author of all time. Huge in the zeitgeist. I'm Michael Swaim. The other voice was Abe Epperson. If you're joining us first because you're interested in Stephen King shit. But yeah, if you're joining us because of Coen Brothers Brothers, you probably already know the deal, but I wanted to explain ourselves for people who might be joining us for the first time. Things this show will be and will not be. What this show is not is a book club, a Stephen King book club. We will not be reading the books. I think Abe, I imagine as well, each of us has read various Stephen King works throughout our lives, and we're free, of course, to bring that knowledge to bear when it adds interest to the pod. But we will not necessarily hold ourselves to having read the book that the thing is based on, or dissecting the differences, or whether the story or book was better than the film, or what, or blah, 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 blah. We are interacting firmly with filmed material, which is our preferred medium. The other thing I want to say before we get rolling that this will not be is an exhaustive list of trivia or behind the scenes information about whatever we're covering. Because I noticed some confusion about that in occasional responses to our last podcast. We find that what we do best is unpack and serve as essentially what would be a reading guide if it were a book club, of like close reading and symbology and filmmaking techniques and grammar and ways to enrich your experience with the film or unit of TV or what have you. So that's what this will be. If you heard Coen Brothers Brothers, you already know what it's going to be. But as Abe said, the domain is anything that's based on anything Stephen King ever wrote. And we, unlike Coen Brothers Brothers, which went chronologically, we're going to feel free to jump around and get out our seats and jump around in the timeline and cover. We're interested to see how this works when we cover things that are not stellar, because the Coen brothers only made things that were stellar. And obviously Stephen King only has so much impact on the filmed versions. I think it's very limited. I don't think he fucks with like people who adapt his stuff very much. So we're going to have a wider variety of things that are good and things that are bad, but we decided to start with a good thing.
Yeah, so it's so funny to me that you're like, we're not going to just read trivia. It occurs to me that you've been in a room for hours researching The Shining and came to the conclusion that most people who like casually go into the hole that is knowledge about the movie and the making of and the behind the scenes of The Shining, it is perhaps one of the most well-documented movies in the totality of cinema.
That's where I feel like in a lot of the cases, Stephen King adaptations, the behind the scenes information has been covered to death. So we should talk about like the story and the themes. And the philosophies.
I think that's what I like better too. And like what makes it a strong, like what makes it good relative to other movies. Like why is he, like I want to uncrack personally, my journey in this podcast is to figure out exactly what makes Stephen King tick, why his ideas have been so prevalent for ages, and why he had the ability, the uncanny ability, and continues to do so, to just create like very captivating horror tropes and notify the viewer or the reader about what the central terror of his stories are. I think he's very effective at that, and that's why he's remade time and time again.
I wanted to do this podcast based on his performance in Night Riders, which we covered on Frame Rate. And I was just like, who's that
the guy eating the hoagie guy?
What's his deal? I got to know more about him.
A hoagie.
What's he into?
Screaming at some Ren Fair knights.
Deep small beans cut. But anyway, I agree completely. And of course, while his main operating mode is like what makes you afraid, fear is the primal human instinct I work within. There are exceptions. I know we'll cover Shawshank at some time, and Stand By Me will come up, I'm sure. And I have the same question. It's like, it's more about us than about him. What is it about us that resonates on a common human wavelength, or at least our culture and our time and place wavelength, that makes these stories? Why is he number one? Why are these stories the types of stories we all like?
And we both love horror. I think it's just a captivating conversation to have, to like figure out what makes him tick and makes all of us tick. I think that was well said. I think it'll create some conversations that we're like more discussing like what terrifies us and what's spooky.
Spoopy stuff.
Yeah.
So let's stop talking about what we're going to talk about and talk. We are dividing this. I'm sorry, you guys. The Spectrum system is dead. We have a new system, but our first segment, you'll find it. You'll come to know and love it as it unspools. Our first segment is called Under the Dome.
Our best guess puts the dome at 20,000 feet, sir.
Did he just call it a dome?
You think we might be stuck in here a while?
Basically, this section is an elevator synopsis of the movie. If you haven't seen it or just need a refresher, we'll real quickly go through the plot.
Yeah, and I realized rewatching The Shining for the purposes of this episode that if you've seen the Simpsons parody of The Shining, you remember all the cromulent details. Like I was watching the movie, amazed how much it follows the plot of, so to speak, the Simpsons Treehouse of Horror parody. Or I was like, I forgot how much they were one-to-ones. Like, the ghosts really do let him out of the... there's a scene in the Simpsons one where they let him out of the pantry and they chastise him for doing a bad job. The ghosts and I think you're doing a very bad job. And that is essentially the subtext of the real scene in The Shining. Is Grady, the murderer ghost, is like, in so many words, the ghosts and I think you're doing a bad job.
Yeah, and I think it's a testament to something for the Simpsons and all their comic efficiency are able to translate the entire plot of The Shining with like all those specific beats in addition to jokes, because the plot of The Shining is very, very simple. It does not have a lot of, there's so much air in terms of like looks And that's something we'll talk about a little bit more about, like people's relation to each other, like conversations that are being had not with words kind of stuff that is just like reinforcing the terror, reinforcing the situation of like whether you read this film as a cabin fever film or as a ghost film, it reinforces those kind of emotional like terrors that mostly it's just a simple story where a guy, Jack Torrance, who's a writer, is taking a job at the Overlook Hotel in the Rocky Mountains to be a winter caretaker because they can't get to the hotel, or if it's not
economically feasible to
enough.
keep because it's a 25-mile windy road to the hotel, and they don't want to pay the city to clear it out, so the hotel closes during the winter storm season.
And so he meets with them. He gets the job. He brings along Danny, his son, and his wife, Wendy. And there's some scenes about kind of introducing who those people are, a scene with the doctor and a scene obviously with Jack talking to the guy who's like Ullman, I believe is his name, leading them into the to the Outlook and giving them the keys to the hotel. Flash forward, they're now at the hotel. They've moved in. And they're being like shown around the place as it's closing down, and then everyone's gone. And then we have basically a long montage of scenes that show Jack's slow, I guess, mental deterioration via ghosts or via cabin fever, where he ultimately
You don't think? There's ghosts.
Like attempts to murder his own family, as per like replaying a story from 10 years previous, where the winter caretaker of this exact same hotel did the same exact thing and killed 2 of his daughters and his wife, and then shot himself with a shotgun.
Wait. You don't think there's ghosts?
I want to get into the
Wendy sees the ghosts.
I know.
She's not crazy.
It's something I think very specific about the Kubrick element of the film, which we have yet to speak of.
But Stephen King would absolutely say there are literally ghosts. Yes,
absolutely, absolutely. Like we'll talk about that a little later. I was just prefacing it with a caveat of in case you did kind of what I did in my youth watching this film.
Sure. Haunted house built on an Indian burial ground. Drives a guy crazy. Tries to axe his family. He freezes to death. They get away. That's the story.
That's the story.
We're sticking to it.
And there's also there's subplot. Obviously, we have some auxiliary characters. We have Grady. We have the whole concept of The Shining.
See, this is what's funny to me. You were the one before we launched this series that was pushing for. You were like, I don't like in Coen Brothers how we had to go through every scene and mention every scene, and I don't need to synopsize before we analyze. Now you're stretching out the elevator synopsis.
I think the elevator pitch can be a few paragraphs. I just don't think it needs to be 40 minutes.
This is way. You think you could get in an elevator to go from like the lobby to the 10th floor, let's say, and have said as much as we've said before the elevator ride was over?
Michael,
that's what an elevator
most
pitch
pitches occur in elevators?
That's what the term means. It means the length of an elevator
the term means. It's just like, I don't know. It's just to get you acclimated to what we're going to focus on and what the important plot beats are. But yeah, I'm done. So let's move on.
Good.
I'm waiting on you now.
No, let's move on. Our next segment is called Skeleton Crew, which is a Stephen King short story. You get what we're doing.
Something in the mist! Shut the doors! Shut the doors!
You're smart. You get it.
And this one is about the creative team or behind the scenes trivia that we might want to bring up because it's relevance regarding the plot, the symbology of the thing.
And what we said at the top, I do think this segment will also likely usually be short because the point is not to just go on and on. Man, I'll tell you, I had to learn about Bloodshot recently. Tangent. Warning. But that's part of what this show is for. And so I listened to a bunch of podcast episodes about the character Bloodshot, who's a Valiant Comics superhero. And there are so many podcasts with like a couple hundred listens an episode where people unspool facts in a very dry manner. And I'm someone who loves to learn, but I just want to like, hey, shout out to all my fellow podcasters out there. Put more of your personality and your own individual journey and insights into it. Don't just don't just literally read the Wikipedia entry. Like, my favorite murder is not good only because they tell you what's in the Wikipedia entry. They tangent off and they express themselves, and you get a taste of what it would be like to hang out with them. Anyway.
I agree. And not only that, I'm going to double down and say I'm putting you on notice.
Yeah, fuck you other podcasters.
Fuck you other podcasters.
Gainfully unemployed. What is this shit?
Oh, yeah. Let's call
What?
it out.
Oh, who?
Huh? Who are you and who am I now?
Quick question.
What is our role?
Jesus Christ. Anyway,
Jesus.
but the point I'm getting at, wait, what did I? Oh, yeah. The point I'm getting at is that Skeleton Crew is space for us to bring up, because we are well steeped in film lore, trivia that we think will bear on what we're going to say when we actually get to the meat of the thing. So there obviously are like reality things that bear on what we're going to talk about. So, I mean, I feel like with The Shining, it's kind of obvious, but I'll open it to you first, Abe. Was there stuff about the creative team or interesting behind the scenes facts that you think inform our conversation to come?
Absolutely. And I want to start first with the advent of the Steadicam. Because the one of the primary operators of the Steadicam in this movie, which gives its kind of iconic look where people follow down. Anytime it's a hallway, it's on a Steadicam, basically. And it's not the Steadicam you normally think of when you see films being made now. It was actually had like wheels on it, and it took a few people to do.
Sorry to interrupt so quickly, but for people who haven't seen a modern day Steadicam, it's like a vest with armatures coming out of the chest and controls that attach to the camera. I just feel like a lot of people wouldn't have seen that.
A gyroscopic mechanism. Basically.
Pretty cool.
Yeah, correct. And it's a very, very, one of the best invented tools of, definitely of camera grip, but maybe of camera of all time. It's like up there to me for filmmaking purposes with like the lens. It's just such a brilliant piece of machinery that allows for a completely transparent and like feeling that you are moving like you're a human being and a witness to these events as if we're, that's kind of the psychology of the Steadicam. But anyway, Garrett Brown is the inventor of the Steadicam. And he invented it in around 1975-76 for a little bit of history. The first film it actually appeared in was the Hal Ashby film Bound for Glory. So there had only been like a handful of films, I think it's like 12 or 15 or something like that actually used Steadicam up to this point. It wasn't hugely adopted. It was used in Rocky, Rocky 2, obviously. It was used in a bunch of other films of this era that people used it as kind of like action rig. This is the first time it was really used since and Ashby used it very restrained in his film. So like no one had really dived into what's the ability of this thing. And what's crazy is that when Kubrick was walking around the sets that had already been built in England and brought Garrett Brown to look at and basically pitch him join our film, Garrett Brown immediately knew. It's been well recorded that he was yep, this is exactly why I invented this machine. No one gets it yet. Kubrick totally gets it. And Kubrick used other techniques like a very accurate speedometer on the rig so that he could duplicate the tempo of a given shot. It would keep your speed constant, you would know after a take you were faster than the last time. So A, he can make sure that every take was identical, and B, he could basically throughout the film know that there is a certain speed of the Steadicam given scene to scene, even if they shot it months before. So he did all of this because Kubrick is meticulous. And I think that the Steadicam, the reason that it was so evocative to Garrett Brown, and we're going to talk about this probably later about the symbology of it, but is that something that the production designers and the people who the set constructors of the actual Outlook Hotel did is they basically made these like a series of mazes, right? It's an impossible hotel when you look at the architecture. Like if you were to draw the maps and look at the blueprints, and there's been books written about this, they made it impossible. Windows lead to nowhere, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's such a planned film, and I think the Steadicam and the ability to walk and break the line from left to right, move on one side, move on the other side, to hide aspects, to cut corners very quickly or very closely. These are aspects of the team that were coming in that were highly technical for the time, and more or less what Kubrick's art is, and why this movie I think is so evocative is that its filming was done on this technology.
That's so interesting in the sense that we are so yin-yang. Like, when I said it's obvious what we'll talk about, I had assumed you were going to bring up the now pretty common knowledge that one of his directing tactics was to have Jack Nicholson and himself treat Shelley Duvall like shit the whole time. Mm-hmm. And I just think it speaks to our natures that you were like, no, I care about the camera thing, and I was like, I care about the people thing. For people new to us, that's kind of how we supplement each other. I didn't know that about the Steadicam.
He's the empath. I'm the monster. Yeah, I mean, that's an important aspect. I did think that you would probably talk about that. I do have some takes on the takes.
I just meant we're like Double Dragon. We're two rude dudes. We're saving the president's daughter, which is your enjoyment of film. And we do that by specializing. And it's interesting that I always can expect the kind of thing that you're going to latch onto, and you vice versa, I'm sure, know what I'm going to say. So I already said it, but the only thing I wanted to bring up, because I know it'll bear later on the conversation, is that in directing, there's a thing you do where you like, I love directing for the theater specifically. You still get to do it on set if you have time. Cracked, we never had time, so it didn't happen that often, except the Cracked Studios projects. But traditionally, when you direct and you do have a lot of time and you get to lavish attention on your actors and treat it like a scene and try to, crack the scene and make it work, as Kubrick insisted upon doing and didn't give a shit about your schedule and went way over budget almost always, there's the tactic of playing improv games and creating pretend realities that we all share for set periods of time. And it can be as short as a single improv game to get everyone's energy up, or it can be as extreme as what would come to be known as the method, where you try to make it so that Daniel Day-Lewis is always Abraham Lincoln, which I honestly think is kind of fetishistic and going too far. It's well documented among performers that that's farther than you need to go to get a stellar performance. And a lot of people who employ the method are assholes. But that aside, in this case, Kubrick decided as a strategic thing, everyone should treat Shelley Duvall like shit the whole time. And there's a documentaries covering this you can watch. But I just think if you didn't somehow know that, that's an important thing about the making of this film that will bear on our unpacking of the arcs, I'm sure.
Yeah. In addition to his treatment of Shelley Duvall, which just to unpack that a little bit more, I think the internal thinking of it, not justification of it, because I share your ideology that it's I don't think that kind of thing should be done without consent, and it's clear it got to a point past consent with Shelley Duvall, and I think that is the fact that wasn't talked about, and it's why unions exist,
Yeah.
That said, I do think that there's something about Kubrick that a lot of people might, who are a little bit more of a film buffs, understand about him, is that it's not irregular for him to do to be almost misogynistic is one thing,
in
but
this case,
masochistic in other elements of his filmmaking strategy. And by that, he is tyrannical, but it's usually done. It's not like we have this perception. I've talked to a lot of people who have watched Kubrick's movies, and there seems to be kind of a misled kind of version of Kubrick, which is that he's this kind of guy. He's like Hitchcock. I've heard a lot of descriptions of Hitchcock this as well, where he took 45 takes to get this one little thing. It's not as much that it's like, oh, it's just not perfect yet, I want to get it more. I mean, it is a little bit of that in the case of when they shot the iconic blood shot of the elevators. That only took 3 tries, but it takes 9 days to reset. I assume it took that long because after they do an attempt, they just move on to shoot other sequences in part of the hotels, moving the mechanisms of filmmaking and all the people necessary to do that. So the production would just assume that they would try through their lengthy run of the entire production that they'll just get it whenever it's ready and reset. And it had a smaller crew cleaning it up. It was probably 3 people cleaning up a whole hallway for 9 days because they couldn't give 20 people to that one job. Their job wasn't to make a movie about this one shot. It was to make a movie. Ultimately, that there's one aspect of Kubrick, but another thing that I wanted to shed some light on is that there's conversations, and it's well documented on his biography and of what his process was and why he would, when it was with actors, make them do 20, 30 takes. And the reason why is that he wanted to dispel the ambitions of the actors and himself to the lines. He wanted to kind of create a mantra, a very Zen-like kind of Buddhist word that you just repeat to yourselves, till all meaning of your initial read had been taken out of it. So he had such availability in editing to choose when people were disassociated with the events versus not. He wanted to have essentially, when you choose, let's say you're a painter, right? And your canvas is editing. And if you have that ability, if you're painting just on one page, you have to choose red as the color. But if you have the entire gamut of performances along a very a thread line of for example, Shelley Duvall feeling very terrified when Jack Nicholson is thrusting a axe through a door. Her terror can be a single note that is the correct note, where the director usually would go that's exactly what I wanted. Let's print it, move on. Kubrick would get to that point in his takes. He'd often get there within 3 to 5 takes, like any other director. But then he would also had this devotion to the idea of but what if I'm wrong? So out of his devout insecurity, he created these masterpieces, I think, by being able to get distance away from it and having the tools at his disposal later in the editing room, where, let's be honest, if you're a filmmaker, that's where the real magic happens, because you get to compile and list actual created moments, the emotions and the through lines that as the audience who are watching manifest themselves throughout these scenes. So if you have increased resolution of being able to essentially turn things on or off, like an orchestra, or think of someone at a mixing board when they're cutting an album, and you're well, just maybe turn on the bass a little bit for that one little bit and then turn it back down. If you have that control, you can create a better, more operatic experience, and therefore that's, I think, one of the abilities of him to do that. Does not justify all the stuff that you're saying, but the shot of the tennis ball running into Danny's toys took 50 times to get right. There's a lot of people who have talked about the Guinness Book of World Records actually has an incorrect record. I think it's been corrected since. It said it took 127 takes to shoot the scene where Shelley Duvall's character is swinging a bat at Jack Nicholson as he approaches her up the stairs. According to the people who were there on the day, the scene was shot a lot, but it was only about 35 times. So it's there's a lot of this mystique around it that I think is turned into a narrative about Kubrick that Kubrick didn't necessarily have in control of. Now, what he did have control of is about how he chose to treat people on set, which was, notoriously wrong.
I also think, even from the artistic perspective, I understand the logic behind that tactic. Mm-hmm. Well, there's a meta-philosophical issue, which is that, and I know Kubrick would not agree with me that this is a valid concern, but for me it is. I'm also a human, like, meat animal that exists in a resource pool. There's a point at which is your art so important that you should go 3 times over budget and fuck everyone over. Like, it's just a movie. And that's funny to say as someone who thinks movies are everything, which I do, but I still think there's such a thing as being up your own ass about how important your art is, always. And I also would say that draining, or the repetition until the lines are meaningless, which he seems to love so much, does tend to make his movies, I feel like you can only come out with an alienated tone. Like, you can strain yourself to only talking about the topic of alienation, because all of his movies are about alienation, and they are all very alienated and off-putting, and the people say the lines like they're weirdly hollow and meaningless. And I'm like, yeah, if that's what you wanted to get to, that's how you do that.
What he did.
But it does make all of his movies samey in tone to me, in a way that I was thinking this while watching this time. I find Chris Nolan this way as well. I think Chris Nolan, and I actually think Chris Nolan is even maybe a cut or two below Kubrick's, like, raw level of talent. But in many ways, I would call Nolan our new Kubrick. He, of like the meticulously made films that are alienated in tone.
He's definitely, in terms of scale, I would agree with that.
Scale, and also the feeling of like every Nolan movie and every Kubrick movie is like a philosophical treatise that you're just sort of looking at. It doesn't suck you in an emotional way. And I think hey, let's move into our next segment called It.
Bill, if you'll come with me, you'll float too. You'll float too. You'll float too.
Where we talk about it. This is the meat of the episode, the body of the episode.
So basically, we're going to, if we do bring up trivia and stuff like that, the point of it is scene work, themes, symbology. So it's always to a broader point or thesis that one of us kind of wants to make.
And we'll probably illuminate why we brought up the trivia we brought up as the preload. So I think we're transitioning now very smoothly, in the sense that I felt, watching the first half hour of The Shining this time, that the acting was ridiculously, laughably bad. And I realized that it is...
I've heard this take.
It's strategic. I understood the strategy in the fullness of the film because, spoiler alert, the movie's good and it is scary. And it created a separation between, I feel, and I don't know if this was the intent, but it's how it affected me. Oh, it's getting at the way that you can be stilted and very polite in public, and there's a separation between your public face and your private face. Like the Jack Torrance that we see interact with the world would never say the word fuck even. And yet he will, behind closed doors, yelling at his wife. So it's like setting up a reality where you think, oh, this is a movie that's going to play in the public space. Like, you know what I mean when I say there are movies that don't violate the idea that we wear different faces in different spaces? They let out, all the characters are unified. Each character unto themselves is their persona, and their persona is their persona, and they navigate the story of the film using that unified persona. Mm-hmm. There are other films that are interested in a true thing, which makes your movie more complicated and may dilute your point if you had a simple point in mind. But a lot of movies play into the other idea that we all know, which is that, well, each individual character actually has multiple facets, and they can act weird. They can act in ways that you go, everything I know about the character would say they wouldn't act like that. But then later you find out, right, but when they were young, they saw someone burn their dog alive in front of them. That's why they acted that way in that moment. And you sort of round out these facets of the character that become a multidimensional understanding of what they may do in any given context. And I feel like The Shining definitely is playing with that, where they're like, you present your relationship, your marriage, as going very well to the public. And that doesn't necessarily completely one-to-one match with how it's going. You might use more vulgar language or be more emotional or blah, blah, blah. And that is used in the film to great effect to build the tension and horror and build what I think is the most interesting aspect, the way it resonates with the journey of an addict and addiction. He's an alcoholic recovering. And to me, that's just, it's a fuel of a lot of the tension. And yet at the same time, it just means you have to sit through this portion where I found the pacing very stilted for like the first half hour, 45 minutes. The pacing stilted, the crossfades unearned, rookie scene writing mistakes. Like every scene began with people opening a door and walking from one room to another room and going, now we're going into this room. And you're like, I know. This is like the kind of exposition that you're taught to cut out. This is stupid. This is pointless. And I think what The Shining does super well, and what Kubrick obviously intentionally did very meticulously, and which he does to great effect in 2001, A Space Odyssey as well, is use boredom, and boredom is not the right word, but use stillness and banality as a tool to create a background environment against which horror is even scarier than it would be if the whole thing were horror. Like Green Room is more of just from back to front, or a survival horror in general. From back to front, there's scary shit happening the whole time and you're scared because you're imagining how scary that would be. The Shining is more classic horror, more Hitchcock, where it's like, actually, for a while, everything seems fine. So fine, it's kind of boring by modern standards, but it's so that when the scary shit pops off, it's really surprising. It's really shocking. And it seems more obscene and more grotesque because you have a very firm grasp of, in this film's universe, what normal reality feels like. And normal reality is people just calmly talking and everything's fine, you know? So it provides that contrast. So I did come to see it as a strategy. I think the standout moment that made me realize it is, of course, Halloran famously getting killed, which differs from the book. The whole time Halloran was traveling from Florida to Colorado, I'm like, Jesus Christ, Kubrick, why are we watching him on the plane say, you know, I'm flying to Denver? And like, why are we watching him rent the snowcat and drive up the road and call the ranger station a second time to check in? And it's like, it's so that when he gets fucking axed in the chest, you're as goddamn shocked as you could possibly be.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
the time investment. So that's why Nolan also is amazing at this. And I'll stop bringing up Chris Nolan at this point. But Kubrick is amazing at understanding what film is and how it's not life, and how your experience of a film can be hacked like you would program a robot, where he's like, the film grammar itself, the underlying film grammar itself is what is making the audience think, well, why would the director spend all this time showing Halloran go from Florida to Colorado unless Halloran was going to play some important pivotal role in saving the family? And so, and you don't, that's what I love, because it uses film grammar at a level where the average film goer is not consciously considering that unless they're doing an analytical like second watch, because you're in the moment thinking, okay, that means that, okay, I take this for granted, that means that, there's enough weight put on here, why would we pan to that unless that's going to come back later? And this Chekhov's gun shit that you don't think about getting fucked with is my favorite thing. So then, of course, when Halloran gets axed in the chest immediately upon arriving at the Overlook, your feeling of hopelessness is supreme, because that was the character that in 99% of movies is the designated character who, at the moment that the Wendy and Danny are about to get stabbed to death, that character is the one who would come from off frame and shoot Jack in the back of the head. Like the off-screen character that's been stabled to save us later has been immediately killed. Kubrick is amazing at making bold filmic statements about the nature of film like that. And it's the same thing we appreciate about Coen Brothers projects like No Country. No Country works because every beat of the story works within the texture of a story, moment to moment, but it works on a whole other level because it also is fucking with what it is to watch a movie. and the unspoken contract you may never have considered between you and the filmmaker. Like if the protagonist dies, we get to see that they broke that contract. And I think Kubrick plays at that level, and The Shining plays at that level.
I agree. There's a lot of what you said. There's two things that, because I agree about with your overall positing of your arguments. There's
Thank you,
two
sir.
aspects of what you said that I would like to give an addendum, or maybe even depending on how you see it, a disagreement with. Which is, there's two things you said. One is the quality of the acting, and then the other one is the stillness of the rhythm. And those are two aspects that I wanted to kind of adjust how I thought about it. So with, I think that they're kind of, as you pointed out, they're kind of all the same. Or they're all leading to one central kind of architecture or point. And it's that the tone of the movie is as such. But with the bad acting, I don't think it's as much bad. I think that there is actually, like, obviously we can take like a single performance of a single line and say, is that weird? Or is that great? What is it? But I think as a whole, there's a lot of subtlety going on in these boring sequences with the acting, where it just seems like they're like the car ride over where they're just talking about the Donner Party.
No, there's a lot there. I'm talking about the interview. The interview where he's just like, do you like it here? I really do. Do you think your family will like it here? I think they sure will. And like the long pauses between each line, the pacing is so weird.
I like that because it sets the tone of the whole thing of like something's off here. And it's also to look at the way in which we do like the social niceties of like an interview, or all the things and the hats that we put on in order to be someone else, in order to get a job or be successful, or in the famous speech that Jack Nicholson has it ever occurred to you that I've agreed to look on the Overlook Hotel until May the 1st? I've signed a letter of agreement, a contract. Do you have the slightest idea what a moral and ethical principle is? Like, he is drinking the Kool-Aid of society. One of the things that I agree with that's been said about Kubrick is that he hates propaganda, and tries at all attempts to dispel the idea that he makes propagandist films, even though he knows it's an uphill battle and in fact probably impossible. But ultimately, I think what he's doing with those, like there's another sequence where Jack to Danny, there's a scene when they first arrive at the bar and they're being thrown through the hotel by Ullman, and Danny's found on the premises because he was exploring outside looking for them. And when he arrives, Jack says to Danny, You got bored of blowing up the universe? Kid says, yeah. And then they all laugh, kind of thing. And then
Meaning
he gives
he was
his wife
playing like an arcade game or something.
Yeah. Then he gives his wife and son a look of absolute spite. And it's also, just to backtrack a little bit in that sequence, it's immediately after, it's the first moment in the scene since Jack said, we don't drink. Which is the focus of the group's attention of like, oh, what's that mean? So the focus is immediately on him. And so he knew that the spotlight was off of him because of Danny's arrival. So can he look truly with the eyes that he actually has at his wife and son as absolute burdens to him? And that is his fundamental flaw and why he's a madman.
Yes, and it's important
villain.
to note that I think
there's subtlety in that.
Like you mentioned, the cannibal scene driving. I think it's very important that Jack is well, it's hard to say because we get very little information, but I have the feeling that Jack is an asshole before he gets compromised by demonic ghost forces mentally. And they, like Kubrick very meticulously in the drive up, you see him be dismissive of his wife in a subtle way that is acceptable, meaning it's not abusive, but she's nothing but nice and empathetic, and
she's a caretaker. She does what
he's
positive.
supposed to do, and he is irritable in a way that
And-
shows contempt. And it was interesting to me because one of my favorite studies is from that Malcolm Gladwell book, Blink, where he talked about a study where they could predict with like 80% certainty whether a couple would be together like 5 years from now, based on no audio, just a video of them talking for 30 seconds. And the thing that indicated if you were going to break up, which the like computer algorithm honed in on and finally revealed, was body language that signals contempt, meaning you roll your eyes. Like, contempt is specific. It's not hate. It's you think this person's less than you. You feel free to shrug off something they might check you on because you think of them as dumb secretly, but you don't tell them to their face. Like, Jack very subtly shows contempt for his family before they get to the Overlook Hotel, and I think that's a very good move.
I think that's
very cool.
I think that's key and well said. I think it in reference to the stillness of Kubrick's movies, and in this movie in particular, it speaks to that. It's talking about that spite, those absolute stolen. Like, we look at those moments as nothing's happening. Maybe it's because we're not looking at the right spot. Now, you can credit or discredit that to Kubrick in saying that, well, if you didn't direct my eye to that and I didn't like focus on that moment, it was a waste of time for both of us. But it harkens back to theater, where you can't really direct the eye. You have to use big gestures in order to distract 100% of the audience towards one direction. In film, we have the ability to do that with just by changing the shot. He doesn't like that aspect of it. He doesn't want to make a propagandist film where he's like spoon feeding you, like you said, a Chekhov's gun earlier. Like, Chekhov's gun is a perfect analogy for propaganda. What's important right now? Well, the gun. Why is it important? You'll find out
it's
later.
Loaded and cocked. Oh,
Yeah.
Does that mean something's going to happen? You bet
yes,
your
it
ass.
does. Remember that. Why? Because it's important. Why? Because I'm doing a thing here.
Yeah, just wait. It's going to come.
Yeah, exactly. And so he's going to make a search for those moments. And there's another filmmaker, Michael Haneke, who made a film called Cachet that is like a very symbolic sequel to this movie, in my opinion. And it's because it deals like not necessarily in plot, but it deals tonally with that exact kind of impetus, which is that you have to kind of search a little bit in these scenes to see really what's going on, to be immersed into it, just like real life is. Like real life, those moments that, like you're talking about in Blink, are sometimes invisible to us, but to other people, absolutely loud and clear. Within 30 seconds, you're going to break up, kind of thing. It's because it's about the nature of a relationship of like, we're screaming all the time to say like, why are they doing this to Shelley Duvall? Why is Wendy such a, like, she's so beaten and downtrodden? It's one of the things that Stephen King hated about the casting of Shelley Duvall, because he imagined in the same role like an ex-cheerleader who had the confidence, because he thought it was more interesting to like put her in that situation that she's not equipped for. A person who's been downtrodden their entire life, which is how Shelley Duvall's really playing it, and how Kubrick was trying to basically get out of her, is a lot more, it's a lot different, because what it's trying to do is it's trying to say, a person that's downtrodden like that would probably be better equipped than the analogy of an ex-cheerleader who has had confidence her whole life.
I also think it's
like that.
Darker and sicker and realer and more upsetting in a way that is actually more legitimately upsetting and depressing, because it's true. I think
very
and I know the book does weave in themes of alcoholism and some people say the snowstorm is a metaphor for Stephen King's cocaine addiction, and he has certainly like admitted that his struggles with addiction brings you to horrifying points, and he certainly uses his struggles with addiction as part of the fuel for what is scary, what is truly upsetting, what is sad. And so a lot of his books metaphorically, abstractly touch on the nature of like struggling with addiction. But The Shining.
And as an addendum to that, just real
Yeah.
quickly, one of the incidences in the Shining, where it's in both the book and the movie, where he talks about how he only hurt Danny once when he was playing with his papers, that came from a real moment where Stephen King looked at his son, saw that he was like destroying his work, and he's had this instantaneous moment. He was like, I fucking want to strangle my kid right now. And then immediately,
Yeah.
because he's a real person, is like, oh,
like,
that's
oi.
dumb. What? But I
Yeah.
really viscerally reacted that way. There's a movie in that, or there's a story in that rather.
Yeah.
And I think that's true I think it's a part of the alcoholism, but it's also a part of like, it's not about the writer. It's about
I shouldn't have
one-to-one.
Yes, I agree. I shouldn't have inserted the alcoholism, because what I really am excited to like get at is I think Kubrick's greatest service to the story is ghosts are scary, but they aren't real. And he did like a nodding service to, hey, there's ghosts, it's The Shining. There's ghosts, there's psychic powers. But obviously Kubrick is more interested in what's more horrifying than A, realizing the father of your child has contempt for you and your child, and from the other perspective, suspecting you might hate your own family. Like that's real shit. That really will fuck a life up. That will ruin your life. That's some fucked up dark shit. And
the
Kubrick
principal
made
terror.
that the engine of the horror. And the dread is so much more palpable than if you were just like, I hope these ghosts don't get us. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it reminds me very much of Ari Aster, who is having a lot of great horror hits right now,
Right.
using sort of the same tactic. Like I read a great interview about Midsummer where he said, where the person was like, where he was like, Hereditary was about my family and how we're fucked up and how we don't always love each other, and like the darker family dynamics exaggerated and literalized into a horror movie, right? And they said, what about Midsummer? And he said, a bad breakup. And they're like, well, okay, that makes sense because they break up in the film. Did you feel that is it about like how you found empathy again and became empowered? And he's like, no, it's about how when my girlfriend cheated on me and broke my heart, I legitimately for a minute there wished she would die. Like I'd like to see her burn to death in front of me. And the horror of knowing that I really wanted that even for a moment, like what manner of beast is man? And I was like, yeah, that's the real shit.
Yep,
I
which is
think Shining is similar.
No, it's a perfect segue.
Similarly
to
honest.
My favorite, like we both dialed in on what the horror trope is. We both picked up that is the best part. I think a lot of people do pick that up, if they...
The dysfunction of the family and Shelley
immediately sold by
Duvall's
ghosts.
position
Yeah, exactly.
is what's so upsetting.
And that's one of the best things about this movie is what Kubrick and probably King to some extent. I haven't read the book actually, so I don't know if he did this in like a formalist attitude in terms of the structure of the book or anything like that. But one of my favorite things to talk about when I think of The Shining is the mirroring and symmetry, and the placement of mirrors in this film, and the placement of how symmetry is used based on screen direction and the hallways, and the fact that unreliable narrators lead us to this kind of spatial inconsistency that is itself the hotel. There's something about how Kubrick approaches the problem of like when we think about a father and a son. Someone once said of The Shining, it's Jack versus the Outlook versus Danny. And that's a common thing. If you look at most of Kubrick's films, they call it the three-way. It's three different... Yeah, they do. It's three different protagonists. It's like a triangle of antagonists, like Full Metal Jacket.
Oh, he likes that structure.
Yeah, he likes the structure of like you not knowing like who's exactly the antagonist of the film.
Because almost every
That's usually
film
clear.
is driven
Yeah.
by a dyad, one protagonist, one antagonist.
Exactly. It's like
He's like, let's
like that.
bump it up a notch of complexity.
Let's bump it up a notch
Yeah.
because that's a little bit more true. Just the idea that's a slightly more complex.
Yeah.
But what he does with mirroring in that, like every time, like Jack, obviously, every time he talks to himself, he like talks to in a mirror. He does a lot of stuff where when he's talking like to the hotel, quote unquote, there are mirrors around. There's symmetry in the ways that like I don't want to get boiled down to it, but there's stuff like Jack creeps towards Wendy in the baseball bat scene. He's traveling in like a counterclockwise like way, which is the direction that Danny traveled on his tricycle, and then Danny turns counterclockwise before he ascends the second floor, which is where Wendy goes. So it's like this weird little dance of like ways in which people turn. Another example of it is one of my favorite little like pieces of trivia or just things that you didn't really notice about the spatial inconsistency in this movie is the freezer scene where he's like pointing out to Wendy and Danny, like, we got a bunch of meat and stuff like that. When he goes to open the door, like the latch is on the left side, and then it cuts to a new shot inside the freezer,
and he opens
and
it
the
from
latch
the
is
wrong
on the
side.
right side. It's a different door.
And it's not
Right?
a continuity error. It was intentional.
And here's how we know why. Halloran opens the freezer and he approaches, and we have a little sequence of that. And then it cuts to back outside where it looks like it's continuous with the previous shot, where they looked in and they had their dialogue, and then they came out and they went about their business. If you look at the door, it's opposite to the first time. So they actually cut, replaced the door, continued the scene. And he
Right.
does this meticulously throughout. He wants you to feel like the outlook itself is a maze.
It does stuff, yeah. Like,
it's
it
also just-
obviously it makes
yeah.
booze manifest when it wants to get
Exactly.
Jack drunk. It does things. Like, the big breaking point is, of course, when like you are following normal non-supernatural rules and you're like, okay, he's locked in there. I wonder how he's going to get out. The house just lets him out. And you're like, oh, I didn't know it could do that. Oh, shit. Okay. Like, the house just sends a ghost to unlock the door and let him out. That's a big breaking point where you realize supernaturality is now playing a firm part in like the third act.
That's a good time for me to point out the thing that we alluded to at the top of the podcast, which is the first time I ever watched this movie, and I was fairly young. It was definitely like maybe high school or maybe early high school. I thought that the point was that there was no ghosts.
Oh.
And I know that Shelley Duvall sees the ghosts, but I, in my like logic, had determined
Shelley
that
Duvall,
was
but how could she see the furry blowing the nice dandy gentleman?
she sees more than one. She sees the waiter with the blood on his face.
Yeah, and she stops and he like says a line.
Yeah, it's
at
all
her.
the same sequence. It's all in that one sequence. And I thought of that as it's a kind of, it's trying to show cabin fever as it infects everyone. And like the villain was cabin fever kind of thing.
By the way,
Now-
the skeletons in the ballroom, dumbest image in the whole movie. I just
Right.
didn't think that worked.
And here's my case for it. It's more of a case that I think Kubrick's, because I have since changed my mind. Obviously, there's ghosts. I didn't even know Stephen King had written it when I'd seen the film in the first iteration of it. But it shows you how if you just like are completely blind to something and watch something, Kubrick had the power to do. My argument is that Kubrick was making it intentionally vague. And the reason that he did that, and I think that's usually agreed upon, is there's a few things that make you go, okay, everything is very unreliable. For example, there's the obvious one of like the booze appears. He can't be getting drunk, right? That must be just like a dream sequence of some kind, right? So you can, and the fact that there's ghosts there and, like they're all dancing and it's 1921 and stuff like that. Like you can all just chalk that up to just unreliable, Jack narration.
But you can see the avocado stain on his jacket after.
And
the
later when
vision.
he's locked in and he's hearing knocks, there is he's got like Oreos and like peanuts, and he clearly like went to
Ate
he just
peanut butter
slept and stuff
fell
like that.
asleep, yeah.
And there's a 40 that's half drank near him. So it's
Oh.
just like there's ways in which they like break. Kubrick is not only giving you these little like David Lynchian kind of like sequences of dreams, he's also weaving in this unreliability of the space And if you chalk that up to ghosts, totally makes sense. There's a supernatural element that explains the doors, for example, or the maze. But just the idea of Jack being absorbed by the hotel.
And the title cards themselves, like I thought it was weird, and then I realized I think it's part of this warping thing you're talking about, where like the first section's called The Interview, and then the next one's called Opening Day, and you go, okay, so it's divided out by segments with segment titles.
And then Sunday
the next
and
one
Monday.
the next one is A Month Later, and you're like, okay, and the next one is Tuesday, and you're like, what even are these title cards?
And then at 4 p.m. and 8 a.m.
and then it says
like,
4 p.m. and you're like, okay, time is impossible to pay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like, well, what's your definition of when this is? Well, what's your definition of when?
Of
It's
anything.
like,
Yeah.
like if you have someone who is so spiteful of their own family and responsibilities, and they are going crazy by cabin fever, I totally understand why stupid, dumb high school Abe could have made the assumption that there was no ghosts.
Oh,
That's all
totally.
I'm saying. So if you watch this movie and you didn't know these things about it, I wouldn't feel terribly out of sorts about it. I think it's Kubrick trying to say, I'm not super down with the supernatural aspect of it because I believe that the true horror elements of Stephen King's source
Are
material
what humans really do to each other. Yeah.
is
no.
actually real, which,
Yeah.
Stephen King is making as an allegory. Kubrick is making it just one step closer to real.
I think that's one of the keys on our journey is, Stephen King is a master of abstracting things that we do want to think about, but are hard to look directly at. A lot of his stories are metaphors for addiction, trauma, grief, callousness, sociopathy, psychopathy. And then he makes it, but it's magic though. So you're okay to go through the journey and think about these issues without thinking about your people you love in your life who really struggle with these things or are the victims of these kinds of trauma. And Kubrick is the type of artist who's like, okay, what if we de-abstractified it and the movie was the real version? Life is shit. The real stuff. So I did want to briefly, and I think it's my last major block for it, is, and it's perfect timing, give a little illumination on the ghostly parts and what the supernatural reading would be. Because another thing I thought was notable this viewing was I had come to think of it as Kubrick completely sapped all the supernaturality out of it because I'm so familiar with the story of him calling Stephen King and saying he doesn't believe in an afterlife and hanging up.
At 3 a.m.
And not wanting it to be supernatural and all this shit and how Stephen King doesn't like it. And I actually was surprised. I was like, actually, he didn't go that far. He went out of his way to include a very subtle but present nods to a supernatural interpretation. He definitely allows for it because the way The Shining's described to us was more mathematical than I remembered it being in a way that I found satisfying. Halloran talks about his grandmother having The Shining and he had it. So there's a hereditary element. And we get the feeling that Wendy or he says The Shining can manifest in specific different ways. It could be like a telepathic link. It could be like you walk into a space and see what's going to happen in the future. Or it could be you walk into a space and see traces of something that happened in the past. And it's up to you to sort of muddle through what your visions are because The Shining can manifest differently in different people. I'm sure this is all from the book, but I was gratified that Kubrick left the space for that. And so you get the impression, and I found it very satisfying in a nerd way, where you're like, oh, Danny is more on the seeing the future and seeing the traces. Actually, Danny's all three. Danny's the super being because he's the special boy. Tony, I think a good takeaway people eventually get that I love is Tony is not bad. Tony is constantly fighting for Danny. For example, you see when Danny needs to write red rum on the door because he's had a vision that his mom will see it in the mirror and it'll warn her of the danger. Tony controls Danny, and Tony picks up the knife not as a threat, but because he's considering cutting Danny's finger to write in blood. Then he realizes he can use the lipstick, and he's like, oh, okay, then I don't need to hurt Danny. And that's the one and only one time, but you can cling to that. That's concrete proof that Tony, whatever this being is that gives him the shining, is on Danny's side. And I think it's interesting that if you think long and hard, you can do that kind of calculus on the supernatural level. Like, I think that it's very apparent that Jack is strong in The Shining, and that's why he's an ideal conduit to get open a pathway and get taken over by the evil of the house. They mentioned the Indian burial ground. They mentioned that this place has just been a place where a lot of death and rape and murder has happened, and that seeps in, and that's why we're trapped in this cycle. And then I thought the most interesting interpretation that I've never had before, could be bullshit, but if you gather that psychic powers are real, and if you've read enough Stephen King books, you know his version is this whole, honestly, almost Marvel-esque extended universe where, yes, like in Desperation and The Regulators, it's revealed like where the Shining comes from, and it's from another dimension, and there's Cthulhu like elder gods involved and all this shit that I don't think we'll honestly get too much into, but I know Stephen King like hardcore fans want us to at least shout out, yes, we're aware of the outer dimension shit and the whole extended Stephen King universe.
And I believe it's canon I believe it's canon, or I read it's canon that like Tony is Danny in the future contacting himself.
Oh, that's interesting.
Because his middle name's Anthony.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Because then also in Desperation, you find out that The Shining was given. I'm not. Yeah, but
that's more relevant to the scenes in the books, because like there's also like if you read that interpretation with the film, it doesn't hold water, because the way that Tony is represented is not the way in which you would interact with the past self. You know, even if you are protective, that is still true.
I'm fuzzy on the details because this is not a book podcast, but having read a lot of Stephen King throughout my life, I remember that it is a thing that like Pennywise is a particular demon from another dimension that also relates to The Shining. It all becomes related through the Dark Tower series, but who cares?
And the Deadlights.
Pardon.
Gesundheit.
But I think the cool read that I got only this time was that in the scene where we see Grady, by the way, masterful horror move, never showing Grady's creepy ass face the whole scene and withholding it and finally cutting to the close of his face, and they picked a creepy looking actor for the first line where he suggests maybe you should kill your family. Very good, just meat and potatoes horror technique. But when Jack is talking to Grady for the first time in the bathroom and they're cleaning his jacket, and he starts saying, you know, maybe you ought to kill your family. He also says, I know you're the caretaker that killed his family with an axe. And he says, I'm afraid I don't recall that at all, sir. I should know. I've always been here, and you've always been the caretaker. You are the caretaker. And it calls out poetically to this idea that the caretaker is this sort of archetype out of time, this tragedy that's just destined to happen and recur. And I love the idea, because you've introduced the idea of time loops, because of course by the end Jack somehow gets absorbed into the 1921 reality. That means that like I like the interpretation that when Grady was going insane in the 70s and killing his family, the demon that was tormenting him and whispering in his ear was Jack. Like they do it for each other outside of time. Yeah. Exactly, which I think is very creepy and cool. Yeah.
It's very, and that's a cool little, we'll talk about more about that later in other podcasts about Stephen King. He's latching on the archetypal aspect of a lot of his stories is very, very interesting to me. And you can glean really from tiny references in the movie that what happened with Grady, like there was a prequel Shining where this guy Grady unfortunately went insane despite his best efforts. His daughters figured out that it was the evil of the hotel, which is an interesting twist because Wendy doesn't ever figure that out per se. She just thinks Jack's going nuts.
His daughters figured it out, tried to burn the hotel down, and that's when he got him. And the wife tried to intervene, and he got her too. And then we assume the house cruelly drained from him and let him become normal again so he could become overcome with grief and shoot himself in the head. Okay. Yeah. That was my climactic revelation that I think listeners will appreciate.
No, I think it's on point because it goes into the mirrored symmetry of all this stuff. It's this idea that what you look in the mirror is yourself, but it has subtle changes. And I think that is like brought down to the atomic level by Kubrick and by King by doing things like they say in the story or in The Shining, they even say it in the film, he killed his two daughters who were 8 and 10, right? Now, we see those daughters because they're speaking in, they have a British accent as well. Yeah. They're ghosts. We see them later, and they're twins, It's this little lack of consistency. It's like the beer that he's drinking. Like he's playing out a tale, and the consistency of the tale itself, the fabric that of things we're supposed to believe is real, have subtle enough inconsistencies that it makes us ask the question, is any of it real, and what's real and what's not? And therefore, we are free to, like, in our own mind, do these things like saying, like, the archetypal thing is correct, where it's like, okay, ultimately, people are just being played out or being quote unquote possessed by some kind of supernatural kind of collective intuition that humans have about how to be, about how to act, how we cause trauma upon other people with our own insecurities, how we feel joy together. And in terms of horror, it's very much so. Ghosts are us from the past, they're being manifested in the present because we're in the present. And that's what's terrifying about it, is that we all have ghosts and that we all have those kinds of insecurities and things that come to light and make us different people, that we do feel possessed when we're so thoroughly involved in our own bullshit that we cause trauma upon someone else.
Oh yeah. I've had that conversation with Jen, a less extreme version of like, you don't understand what writing is like. When you interrupt me, I have to restart and it takes a long time to get focused again. And I'm like, man, I hate that I
she was just trying to make you a sandwich.
Scene, yeah. But I didn't go.
Just like,
I didn't go.
Do you want something to
so
eat,
why don't you
honey?
do me a favor and get the fuck out of here? Anything like that. Yeah.
There's one last bit that I wanted to bring up that's less but it's kind of like my final thing that I just thought it was a thing that I found that was kind of cool and not a lot of people know about it. This is the film that birthed the very tumultuous and wonderful relationship that's been documented between Steven Spielberg and Stanley Kubrick. And the way it happened is that they were shooting at a particular English enormous set. I forget its name. It starts with an E. And that's where Raiders of the Lost Ark was about to shoot.
Elstree.
But because he went like 30 days over or whatever it was, or even more, it pushed Spielberg's shoot. So already Spielberg's coming in hot with like, Kubrick, you piece of shit. I know you're Kubrick, but this is bullshit and stuff like that. They ended up turning in to be friends. And then something Spielberg wrote about or talked about in an interview was about how good this movie is. And there's just something that, like, you hear us yuck yucks talk about it, or you who are listening to this talk amongst your friends about whether you like this film or, any film. The way that Spielberg talks about Kubrick is so fascinating to me. And there's just this, it's not exactly a quote, but it's a paraphrase from a section that he talks about a scene in this that I wanted to just kind of replay that, which is that Spielberg noted that there's a clear way that most filmmakers would approach the scene where Wendy's looking through the all work and no play, all the papers. Yeah. And it's just extended shots of that and her face, and she's horrified. And we're in that moment, and it's very claustrophobic, meaning that the edges of the frame are very close to us, right? And so if that's the system that you're building, most filmmakers would do what when they then go, and then Jack arrives, is that he would be over her shoulder, right? He would be upon us. It would be a
I
shot.
thought you'd stay in the shot of her looking at the papers, and he'd just come over her shoulder,
Right. Instead, Kubrick abruptly cuts away from
a
Wendy
super wide.
to a shot from him in darkness behind a pillar that tracks over to even more distant view of Wendy from behind. And so it prepares the audience for Jack's like arrival into the frame and eliminates any shock of his appearance. And then this is Spielberg paraphrase, is that it's an unusual way of filming, and editing the scene this way had two benefits. One, it allowed that the remainder of the sequence to maintain tension without a moment of relief that would follow from a shock. And two, by avoiding a surprise at that moment, Kubrick saved the biggest scare in the film for Halloran's murder, in which Jack's sudden appearance does come as a shock. So this is Spielberg, who understands how scenes and moments in cinema play, and we talk about. Spielberg has this whole thing that he talks about all the time, which is you got to have a boring section of your movie. Because if you don't, there's no contrast to allow for the exciting parts. If it's constant excitement, well, you're just making Transformers. And this is him saying, I'm learning from Kubrick right here. This is Kubrick antithetically doing what we're all trained to do. And I think it's one of Kubrick's powers, is that he always would do the thing that he would do the counterintuitive direction than most directors. And that's what makes him memorable. We can say what we want about Stanley Kubrick in terms of, obviously he's a monster. I think that should be something that we all very much so wear on our hearts and sleeves when we talk about Kubrick, because he did things and was a part of a culture that was not very empathetic to actors and such like that. I think that Hitchcock is in that same circle. But in the same instance, we should always say that. In the same instance, he is also someone who's got such an unusual way of direction that, of course, he is one of the most referenced and quoted, artists of many generations, from The Simpsons all the way to just how many times in Ready Player One had it, how many recent Shining examples have been just in the zeitgeist. It's just one of the most quoted.
The
movies
opening
of all
shot,
time.
just a top-down helicopter shot of a car driving through a pine forest, is now
Get
one
Out,
of
right?
Well, yeah, Get Out starts with it, but I would argue, House that Jack Built, I would argue it's one of the most used shots in film, to a degree that people don't even realize that it's from The Shining per se. It's just the shot that every horror movie starts with. Oh, helicopter shot of car driving through woods from the top. It's crazy how overused that shot is now, and it's from The Shining.
Talk about how counterintuitive Kubrick was. Kubrick had John Williams lined up to do the music for this movie. And then he just, for some reason, for his own reasons, decided, you know what, I think I got it, because we'll just use a bunch of different compositions from a bunch of different artists. And it's
it opens with Desiree, which my dad taught me to play on the piano when I was a little kid.
Yeah, and there's a few musical moments like the sticks that play during the whole main.
Oh, when
sequence
she pulls the
original
paper out of the typewriter and it does a horse sting, that really works.
Mm-hmm.
I thought the diegetic sound of him throwing the tennis ball against the wall over and over while you look at a blank page, like the booming dread of not being able to write. I think what you're getting at that's really true and really key is Kubrick, like Hitchcock, understands that fear falls into two buckets that are time related: shock, which is present tense, and dread, which is future tense, something that's going to happen, that you suspect is going to happen, that's bad for
continuous.
you. Then, of course, if you
Suspense.
want the past, that is a different kind of movie, because the name we have for something bad in the past happened is regret, and that's a drama. But when it comes to horror, you're basically shock in the present tense or suspense, dread in the future tense. And he actually has a hand on the rudder of the balance between those two things. Whereas I think most people making horror movies don't even think about, they don't even talk in the terms we just talked about. They don't vibe with that. They don't think of that as a meter or a lever that they're pulling. And I think Kubrick and Hitchcock both understood that shock and suspense are different things, and you actually have to think about the balance between those things.
When to employ
when to
them.
employ each,
Because-
or you get better results
and
if you
'cause-
keep it in mind.
Yeah, because compare that to a lot of modern day horrors and stuff like that. I watched like many months ago. I forget what the movie was. It was the movie where it's like,
Oh God! But
fuck, they like smile really big or something like, and it's just one shock after
sorry,
another.
my allergies are killing me. If you can hear it,
It's
at
truth or
home.
dare or whatever.
Truth or dare, yeah.
Yeah, I hear it. Yeah, it's just like it's just constant shock, and it's just like you become not shocked anymore.
Agreed.
So understanding the itemization of that kind of thing and when to employ it is truly the directors. Like if they can nail that, they're a good
In the
director.
horror genre, for sure. But also, as you said, and it can't be underlined enough, like Hitchcock. Hitchcock was worse, though. Dude, Hitchcock was such a piece of shit. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, just Google, like, Alfred Hitchcock was a piece of shit, and the big stories will come up. Dude, like
He's also very verbal about it. Like he didn't
he would have gotten
apologize.
canceled
At least
today.
Kubrick apologized a few times.
No, but
you know?
Hitchcock like rises to the level of a sexual predator by our standards today. But not only that,
there you
like
go.
to get the footage he wanted in The Birds, he had an actress film for like 18 hours with them just throwing live birds at her. It's like animal cruelty, and she didn't consent or know that's what was going to happen. And like, there's a shot in The Birds where you see a bird go right by her eye and cut her on the eye. That's real. That bird could have blinded her. They were just throwing birds at people. Like, it's just a piece of shit. And he would groom young starlets to have these weird asexual relationships with him. But anyway, I'm ready to get out of it if you are, mainly because more snot is falling out of my head than any time I can recall in the recent past. But I wanted to shotgun some final points, which
Yeah,
will
hit
give
me.
you time to gather any if you have some. Point. You could obviously climb to the top of the hedges in the hedge maze and get to the top and look out and see the way out, or walk to the edge of the maze on the top. And just generally, Jack's really fucking stupid to not figure out what his son figures out, which is you could follow your own footsteps back to the entrance. Like the fact that Jack freezes to death in the hedge maze, and I know in the book it's a topiary garden that comes to life and they didn't do it for the CG because the CG was lacking. But man, Jack freezes to death like a fucking idiot. Like there's like 4 or 5 ways I could have thought of how to easily get out of the hedge maze. He's holding an axe. He didn't even try to chop through one of the hedges.
Yeah, the axe. That's what I thought of. Yeah.
But also you can tell from looking at it that you could climb up it pretty easily. Just climb out. All right. Second point.
In the maze's defense, the people who actually shot the sequence, it was people got lost. They like put up signs and everything. People got lost. Luckily, they had radios and stuff, so they could figure it out. But it was like a big time suck. That maze is horrible.
Like the crew would actually be like, I'm stuck in the fucking maze again.
Like I don't know where
I'm bringing
I am.
coffee,
all I have
but
is
I'm fucked.
carrying a light. Yeah.
Also, we have gone this whole time without saying it. We just have to say it. Another huge thing that the film rests upon is Jack Nicholson's performance. And people who only know old Jack Nicholson might think of him as like a little over the top or have not researched when he was at his prime. This is a prime. This is like One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest status. Like he's swinging for an Oscar. Jack Nicholson's performance in this is varied and deep and meticulous and it blows you out of the water. Like, it's like Clooney and Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? Like I was just transfixed by Jack Nicholson the whole time. And I especially wanted to point out to modern horror directors who might be hearing this, that one long shot of Jack just staring into the middle distance when you clearly know because of context that he's hearing demonic whispers in his head would have been completely undercut if you added sound effects of overlapping whispers or people saying, kill your family. Like so much more effective than the 99% of horror movies today. When you want to show someone being possessed, you have a slow push on their face and you hear a sound effect of voices chattering. Fuck that. Let the actor just show it.
Yeah.
Speaking of actors' faces, Danny does a very good Toni Collette horror face. I feel like they have a similar vibe to their horror faces. He takes his first shot of bourbon at the exact midpoint of the film, which I think bolsters the idea that it's an addiction metaphor, at least one level.
Did you also notice that the face that he makes when he takes his first shot is the face that he makes when he's dead and frozen?
Evil? Oh, when he's dead.
His eyes go up and he shows his lower teeth.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
That might be all I got. Oh, I just because I saw it recently and loved it. I think there's some Lighthouse overlap. He breaks the snowcat on the radio. You're not going anywhere. But also, it's like Shelley Duvall does all the work to maintain because we see her in the boiler room. We never see him go to the boiler room. She does all the work that presumably cares so much about, the social contract. Well, he is like, no, I have to commune with the lighthouse. Like, I have to be in here writing, which of course turns out to be he's doing nothing. I have no idea why I brought that up. I like the lighthouse.
Yeah.
2 final points. They relate.
Mm-hmm.
I guess 2.5 or 3, depending on how you count it. One is Shelley Duvall's final act in the film that's strategic is to go to sleep, is to like sleep on it. She locks him in the pantry and decides to sleep on it. And the next thing that happens is her son wakes her up screaming red drum. And from that, and then all hell breaks loose and it's climax action from that point forward in real time. So my question is, for someone who's so meticulous, I do think Kubrick is at root a misogynist, and that's a spectrum. I'm not saying he's the worst guy that ever, he's not Tucker Max or whatever, but I do think he overlooks women and minimizes women, and I think it's on display here, and I think it's worth pointing out. Shelley Duvall is kind of fumbled at the end, and I think it's the weakest part of the movie because so much of the dread came from me empathizing with her being a very realistically grounded person who is trapped in an abusive relationship that's getting out of hand and trying to push back and set boundaries, but not being comfortable with that and finally making the decision that I have to separate from this person. And that's so fucking ripe as a metaphor, like, so that it seemed like a huge waste that her arc doesn't arc. She escapes through Danny's cleverness, and her husband dies. So in that sense, their marriage is annulled. But if you know what I mean, and I know you do know what I mean, there is no traditional final beat to her arc, which implies to me that the filmmaker was not thinking about the story through her experience.
No.
And I think
he was thinking about how, like, Jack was going to have a resolution, not how she was going to have like a counterpoint.
Yes. And it's really not just for the sake of like girl power or wanting to be a white knight feminist or what have you. It's mathematically true. Like, I think Abe will back me up on this. There was a lot to mine in that arc, and it's actually disappointing that there's no final beat to that arc, that Shelley Duvall doesn't wrap up in any notable way or comment on what she was going through.
I agree.
And I will just say that I think the more realistic and hilarious version of this movie would have been that when he sticks his head through the hole to say, "Here's Johnny," and pauses, she fucking stabs him right in the eye. She's holding a giant knife, and he is putting his weapon down to jut his face into the room and go, "Oh, hello there." She should have stabbed him in the goddamn teeth, dude. And I believe in real life she would have. Like, I believe someone in that position would have stabbed him in the face in that moment. Realistically.
Oh, yeah. And go for the eyes. Yeah. We're trained.
And it would have been super funny to see that happen, but we got what we got.
Yeah, we got what we got. I will say that her performance in that is absolutely captivating.
Oh, yeah. And it's why I also, I pull the...
And I don't know how much is her and how much is absolute... I hate this.
Yeah, you can see both.
Something very clear about that sequence is that I've never seen an actor portray "I hate this" better than Shelley Duvall in this
Toni Collette in Hereditary comes close, which is why I bring it up. But because both movies employ the tactic of bunch of stuff, hard cut to super close of the actress's face, showing you what it really means to look scared. Yeah.
The horror.
And in both cases, I think it's a slightly slowed down shot, the close of the face. And in both cases, they're like shaking their head a little bit. Like they can't contain how much they want to say no. But yes, I think you're right. Shelley Duvall, the amazing thing about that bathroom scene is you can see both layers. You can see an actress pretending to be scared that she'll die, but you can also see an actress truly just not wanting to do what she's doing, just not enjoying being there, doing that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's tough to say honestly because there's other sequences like when she's sneaking around with the bat on the stairwell. Like her performance, there's like something wrong.
Yes.
You know, like you're like this feel like I know what you mean when you said earlier about the bad acting, because it's like it seems like something was told to her before or something like that she's acting out of sorts.
Yes,
like she's so broken already where it's just like this feels
she seems disoriented
sudden
a lot.
And I think that is probably reminiscent of Kubrick's, like, all right, let's do another take like that. I'm
1,000 times.
And just telling her straight up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, how can you do it? Well, you can do it this way. I thought I did that. No, you're not doing it that. You know, like these are the comments that he's giving her, which is something you never do to an actor because it deflates their sense of
Oh,
worth.
and he would famously tell PAs, like a PA would go, is that hard? Do you need a chair for the break and shit like that? And he'd go, don't get her a chair. Don't empathize with Shelley. Like that was a direction he gave to his staff.
Yeah.
Don't sympathize with Shelley. That's really fucked up, dude.
It's really fucked up. It did create this performance.
I guess.
Whether up to you if it's worth it is up to whether or not
I would argue you
like
can't
this
even
film.
prove that that's what did it. There's a chance that if he had just very meticulously and narrowly described what he wanted, I want you to be scared but also disoriented, she could have given you an identical performance just by acting hard. Like, we'll never know because he didn't give her that chance to
impossible.
try.
It's literally impossible because you can't do
and
two
you can't
things
ever
at once.
determine once and for all what was the factor in a performance that gave it the whatever.
No.
Yeah.
No. And what take was it? Was it
Right.
because like I know that if I was an actor and it was like, how many takes did you do? I did 40 takes of that. Which one did you use? I used the second.
You'd be
one.
like, you motherfucker.
You motherfucker. Yeah. But like if we did that, I would also be the motherfucker. I've made a lot of stuff and like I just cut a thing where I was like, there was a whole thing where like you were dialing in, like you were doing a performance and you were dialing it in and you're like, nah, I don't like that because this, that, and that. And then you did another version and you're like, I like that a little bit better. But then, and you did it, you ended up doing like 18 versions of it. You directed yourself, I'll say. But I ended up using like the second one.
Right.
The one that you were like, I like that better.
It's technically a waste of
you
time, but
clearly
how
didn't
could
do
you
it.
know ahead of time? Yeah.
And I was like, I don't know what you're going for, man. You know, like this feels the funniest to me. And we're just doing comedy.
Was it the mayor voice that I...
It was a mayor
I think
line,
it's
yeah.
because the mayor is going to be a staple of that show if we continue it, and I want him dialed in. Yeah. I realized he's
I think you got
he's
there.
halfway between Chunky Bubbles, which is a character Paul F. Tompkins does, and the camp commandant from Malcolm in the Middle, who is a guy that I love that guy.
You're also an enigma because, as you said earlier, when you were talking about how like sometimes people just want to like come to set and just like they don't think about like when I was talking about the unions and you were talking about like sometimes like you're costing the production so much just by this random bullshit.
And
or
it's a
whatever.
personal issue how much you let that affect you or you care about that.
You're right.
Yeah.
You're an enigma because I've gotten comments from people who don't know you, working on sets with you, like people who would be like, what's with this actor, man? He's just standing by camera, but like not like he's like on his phone, but he's just waiting for like everyone else is over at Crafty enjoying themselves, posting on like Instagram, doing normal stuff that you do. You're like, well, because if I'm already here, it doesn't waste the time to get me, and it's just like, I remember Cruz going like, that is amazing. Like, it almost made one of my production designers cry. Like,
yeah.
it's just like how selfless.
Well, you
that
and I
is.
have
It's like they
always
respect
tag
that.
teamed fucking everything, and I have
Yeah.
often said I identify more with the crew than the cast of most sets I'm on. I tend to like vibe with them. I love my actor friends, but you know what I mean? I'm in that headspace, which a career actor who's only an actor is not. Crew people, all crew people, and I say I identify more with the crew in this regard. You are thinking about the reality of the shoot from above, wondering whether we'll get our day done in time and worried about all the pieces. Actors traditionally don't worry about that. I do, because I've been in both worlds and it's in my nature.
So, and the fact that you have empathy shows that you're like, yeah, I could enjoy myself like noticeably
Or we could
more
all
right
go
now.
home
or
18 minutes earlier.
feeling good. Yeah, exactly. It's
Thank you. I really appreciate
like
that.
It's that kind of, yeah, absolutely. I think it goes like, it's something to be said about, like, that was a conscious effort made by you. No one necessarily does that, and it's not the job of anyone to ask for that. And therefore, when Spielberg does things like not even ask for it, but demands it, and also like creates an air of mystique around why he's doing it so that no one gets wise to it, it comes off as seriously unnecessary.
I just lack the...
It is also misogynistic
Yeah.
and bad, but I do think that there is a reason that he believes that it's necessary and it's not bullshit.
Yes.
Even though the methodology in which he employed to do so is wrong and should never be.
I care about
replicated.
art so much, but I care about people more, and I don't think Kubrick does. I think
Absolutely.
he actually thinks
No, he
art is
doesn't,
more
and I don't
important than
understand.
people. And it's
Yeah.
funny to me, I think neither you or I have the sheer confidence it would take to be on a set like 2001: A Space Odyssey and go, I don't like the way this white void is lit. Rip it all down and rebuild it.
Rip
and
it
then
all
the producer, representing the people who gave you the money to do this, comes and goes, you can't afford that. It'll take you like 150% over budget. And you go, I'm doing it anyway. Fuck you. And they go, why? Why? What gives you the right? And you go, because my art is so important. It's more important than your petty concerns.
And more importantly, what are you gonna do? Stop the movie?
Yeah. Well, we were at, remember when we
It's,
saw Spielberg talk at USC, and he told a story about Kubrick calling Spielberg from
Yes.
one wing of his mansion because he was choking on a sandwich and he couldn't remember the number for his butler. And he's like, call my butler and tell him to come into the other wing. And
Yeah, he thought he might pass out in seconds, so he's like, make sure, call Martha.
I'm
Tell her
choking.
to-"
And my house is so
Yeah, that
big
was
she
actually
can't
his
hear
widow. Yeah. And he ended up doing it, and she arrived, and he had just finished
me. He's
choking.
like, I'm fine.
Like, he was just like, oh, it's all right, but it could have been bad.
I never want to live in a house so big that my staff could find me choked to death and no one heard me choking.
Man, the way we're all going to go is going to always be hilarious. Like, if there is an afterlife, the way we all go is going to be hilarious to each of us.
I hope.
Because you're like,
Yeah.
It's like that Norm Macdonald joke about, like, I don't know what happens after you die, but I know the first thing that happens to you is you are found.
That's a good joke. Yeah.
Yeah. But anyway,
That's
it. So they had a wonderful. There's a on Kubrick and an on. There's like an on director series, and the one with Kubrick and Spielberg, they ask like the same questions to him, and there's a great back and forth, even though it's through the interviewer, of their relationship, and it's like, I find it's not only very fascinating because they're both like obviously titans of this industry, but also hilarious, full of little stories like that, where it's just like, these are two old men just enjoying the ends of their life. You know, obviously Spielberg's younger, but like, he's enjoying the end of his life, just having a good time.
It's
making an
interesting though.
AI,
It's like watching
you know?
Herzog talk to Kinski, because like it's come out now that Kinski, who has passed, was like molested his own daughters and stuff. Like Kinski was truly a psychopathic, despicable
Troubled
madman,
individual.
and he was good friends with Werner Herzog, who, from what I can tell, is a genuinely, like, he's an oddball by most of our standards, which is why we find him funny, but he's a thoughtful artist who doesn't really, well, Fitzgeraldo people died. He will go too far in the pursuit of art, but if you know what I mean, he's not Kinski. He's not like a wild animal. He's not
like, I want to play Russian roulette.
No, he doesn't have the crazy
right
abusive tendencies. And I feel like there's a similar vibe when you see them talk where you're like, Spielberg, how are you friends with Kubrick? You're kind of normal. It's like Herzog, how are you friends with Kinski? You're kind of normal.
Yeah, that's also another fascinating documentary is just the Kinski.
Oh, God. Friends who have held guns to each other's head multiple times in real life. That's a weird situation.
And like going into battle and like trying to create danger and like releasing like they had a plot to like release a flu virus amongst
staff. So they couldn't quit and go home, like they'd be quarantined, and they may as well work on the movie.
Yeah, it was something weird about that.
Like that.
They just they joked about it. They didn't do it, but it's just like you guys are unhinged and like enablers.
Yeah. Well, they would do shit like Kinski would jokingly pull a loaded gun, and Herzog would quote unquote jokingly hold the barrel to his head and be like, okay, then this is that. And it's like, are you friends or are you some kind of performance art?
Right. Oh yeah, that reminds me. There's another one of these too. Is that Kubrick shut down the set for a single day of like 200, because I think it was Scatman Crothers. He came on set for his first day, and he had one of those handheld chess things, like the chess set. And as soon as Kubrick saw it, he was like, "Oh, you play chess? Are you any good?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm pretty good." And he's like, "Let's play chess." And then they played chess all day. And Kubrick won all except one game. And I think it was Scatman Crothers said, or like, "Why'd you do that? Like, you just," and he's like, "I haven't played chess with like a good opponent for a long, long time. And you're like pretty damn good."
And he's like, "Well, why'd you shut set down to humiliate me all day? You're a dick."
He's like, and my guess is that like Kubrick probably already thought that like the day was a wash for XYZ reasons that we'll never know, and it doesn't matter.
The light wasn't right,
but,
so he used it as an excuse to fuck the day.
But he exactly. That's the kind of shit we're talking about.
These
with
auteur
these
sons of bitches. People shouldn't get killed to make your movies, and we value movies very highly. So get your shit together, Kubrick.
Get your shit together. I'm putting you on notice.
Coming for you, Stanley.
Do you want to segue to the final?
Yeah,
bit?
So that's it. It is it. And that leads us to our final segment, which will be exceedingly short for this first episode, The Stand.
Time to make your stand.
Where we give
it's a short
review, but then also I think something that will become more important as the show continues is like, where does this stand relative to the stuff we've covered in the past? So the reason I said it'll be extra short is it's the best one we've seen so far. I got to be honest. I think it's top of the heap.
Here's the problem. It's top of the heap so far. And unfortunately, for my money, I don't think it'll get much better than this, but I'm welcome to be surprised. And I'm sure I'll find many, many things that are engaging.
I wanted to set a high bar for our rubric, but I think there are things, I can already think of things I would put above The Shining for sure. So that'll be fun.
And that's for later.
But my capsule review is 90% out of 100. I wish Shelley Duvall's character had an ending to her arc. That's about it. Mm-hmm. No. You can do it
in terms of just the what we see on screen, taking out all of the stories.
I'm not trying to set up a system. I said 90% out of 100 as like a holistic way to say it. I won't do that every time. You don't have to do that.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I think it's it's memorable and quoted so often for a reason, and I think the reason is because it is for XYZ reasons. And we can demystify it, more and more, in the comments if people want to engage. But ultimately, I think it's because the combo of King's ideology with Kubrick's absolute resilience to the goals of his particular brand of filmmaking and employing all the artisans and actors in this movie, I really think that there's a reason this is one of the top films of all time, and it's regarded as such. And it is namely because it's a fucking
It's
good
entertaining,
movie.
it's engaging,
So,
it's mesmerizing, it's very
terrifying.
disturbing and
Yeah.
scary. It ramps up to a horror climax that stands with even current horror masterpieces in terms of how upset you are while it's unfolding. Good horror. Very good.
it is, yeah, it is what it is. I'm sure there's many horror films that many people will regard as like, that's better. Like, or like you were saying a little earlier, it's kind of boring. All true. All true.
I would argue it's kind of boring for 45 minutes, and then you realize, oh, it's going old school. It's doing that thing where it's boring for 45 minutes because by the end, it's going to be brutal as fuck, and it is. So I'm fine with that. And it's not, I mean, there's only one person dies, or well, two people counting Jack, and it's not
one
gory.
murder.
But what it is the main thing you really need in horror, which is humans saying off-putting, confusing, upsetting, aggressive, disturbing, hurtful things to one another. That's the heart of horror. We dress it up with the ultimate release is, and I kill you. And it's kind of a release because now you're out of the movie and I'll stop saying horrible shit to you. But the texture of a lot of what upsets us in horror are the moments where it's just the buildup, the horrible threats being made, the suppositions, the way that it's confusing and disorienting, and The Shining hits at every level in those regards. I just want people to know, if you haven't seen it, like, it's no Hostel, it's no Saw, but it's super fucking scary.
Yeah, and I think it's does that by creeping into your skin a little bit, and I like that. I like that about King, and I like that about this movie.
Yeah. All right. Well, as always, you can support us at patreon.com/smallbeans. We do exist because you help us, so thank you.
Yes.
Please, if you are not in a spot where you feel like or can afford to patronize us with the monies, it's very helpful if you go on iTunes and rate us or review us. Other things I should say. Oh, I'm on Twitter at Swaim_Corp. Abe's at Abe the Mighty. That's all. That's most of the stuff. Our logo's by Michael Vincent Bramley. And we hope you like the new show. Give us feedback. It's not too late to tailor the format or what have you.
Yeah. That's more or less it.
I can't wait to hear what musical stings and shit you come up for this. I feel like it's up your alley.
Well, I think I'm going to do a thing where it's like takes the sound of the movies that are relative to the titles and like do some kind of intercut.
I do think
Fortunately.
these episodes should start with an audio snippet from the trailer of the thing we're talking about, like Gamefully does. Like I would like to have heard some Shining shit at the top of this.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I mean,
We
for
will
like the
see.
segments, I wonder what you do. I totally trust you, and I'm just excited to hear what you come up with.
Well, probably just be fart sounds, so don't
I was
get
thinking
too
probably
trustworthy.
that single high piano note that is every horror trailer now. Ding!
Well, now I can't do... Well, I thought you were going to do the typewriter sound, say the typewriter sound, and I had thought of that already.
Oh.
And now I can't do it because I just said it, so I fucked
Well,
myself.
yeah, we need some kind of intro theme, and we need sounds to separate the segments, I would say.
This is work for an email.
Is it? Oh. I say,
I don't know.
Abe,
It's fine. This is how
our
we work.
podcasts are so important. Fuck these people and their time, right? They'll
That's
wait
true.
for us. We should
are wasting everyone's time, and that's
We should play
fine.
chess right now.
Yeah.
How awesome is it? A detail that in Holleran's house, he has like a beautiful Nubian ebony princess
He's two.
above his bed and across from him, so that when
And
he's in bed, he
across.
can still look at a beautiful nude woman.
Yeah, I was reading about that because I was like, "What is that? Is this a joke?" Like, but apparently that was like according to film historians, that was like a thing at the time. Like that was Kubrick's attempt to be like, yeah, he's just like a normal guy.
You know how normal guys have a couple tasteful nudes up,
Yeah.
like Quagmire style.
Yeah, it's definitely right there. They are both
Gorgeous.
It's just not what you expect out of just a dude just sitting in his bed with his PJs
a very square
just
postcard shot. You're
to
like,
the
oh yeah,
TV.
porno poster. Nice.
Yeah. You're like, all right, cool.
All right, let's get out of here, my friend.
All right, my man. All right, bye everyone.
This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The Beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you.